How do you get someone to care about a problem as massive and complex as climate change, homelessness, or sex trafficking? The answer might surprise you. It's not more data, it's more story. Today's guest has spent her entire life proving that storytelling is the most powerful tool we have to inspire action. Hey, everybody, I'm Steven Schauer, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, the show where we uncover the incredible personal stories behind the fight for a more sustainable and just world for all. Today's episode, I sit down with Lynn Bohart, a mystery writer, educator, and former nonprofit executive who has dedicated her life to helping others and helping others tell better stories. We talk about how Lynn uses the power of storytelling to tackle real-world issues like sex trafficking, child abuse, and homelessness in her novels, without ever preaching to the reader. You'll hear how she blends suspense, empathy, and emotion to turn social issues into personal ones, moving her audience not just to feel, but to act. We also explore Lynn's decades of experience in the nonprofit world, where she's helped organizations reframe their communications, ditching sterile stats in favor of emotional narratives that actually raise money and change minds. She shares why our brains are wired for story, what nonprofits and social justice campaigns are getting wrong, and how emotion, not logic, is the true driver of human behavior. Here's a bit more about today's guest. Lynn Bohart is not your average mystery writer. She holds a master's degree in theater and spent over 35 years working in the nonprofit world. After retiring from her day job, she launched Little Dog Communications, a freelance writing company that allows her to write for nonprofits across the globe. Lynn is the author of 11 paranormal mystery novels, 2 short storybooks, and 3 nonfiction books. Passionate about using fiction to highlight real-world problems, she has tackled issues like sex trafficking, bullying, child abuse, and homelessness in her stories to spark awareness and inspire action. Lynn has taught crafting the story for more than a decade through Green River College and has spoken at major writing conferences, including the Seattle Film Summit, the Business of Writing Summit, and the Crime Thriller Summit. Most recently, she added book coaching to her growing list of services. So, if you've ever wondered how to make people care, really care, about the issues that matter most to you, or how to move an audience from awareness to action, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Let's dive in with Lynn Bohart here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Lynn, welcome to Stories Sustain Us. How are you doing this evening?
Good, Stephen. Thank you very much. And it is evening. Wow.
It is.
I haven't done a podcast in the evening before. It's kind of nice.
Actually, I record all mine in the morning as well. And this is a rarity for an evening interview because you and I are not only in the same time zone, but we're probably only, 5-10 miles apart from each other right now. So tell everybody where you are. I'm in the Seattle area, and where are you in?
I'm in Kent, which is sort of it's like South Seattle, Southeast Seattle area. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for making time to chat with me tonight, and really eager to jump into this with you. I mentioned in the introduction of you, I had Adam Steelstra on as my very first guest talking about storytelling, and now we're in the very beginning of year 2, so I kind of wanted to have another storyteller come on. So I'm super excited to have you as my guest, and looking forward to diving into the power of storytelling from your perspective. But first, let's dive into your life. Like, where did you grow up, Lynn? What's your story before we get into the storytelling?
I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
That'll only become relevant, in one of my books, but grew up in Southern California. So I grew up in the Pasadena area, Sierra Madre, if anybody is familiar with that. And then went to college in San Diego. So, I spent a lot of time in the California area, got my master's degree there in theater, specifically in directing.
Okay.
I love to tell people what to do. So that was kind of my motivation there. And then oddly enough, I've never worked a day in my life in theater.
Okay.
At least I have not gotten paid to do it. When I finished my graduate degree, thinking that graduate degree would just open doors for me, I was quickly informed by my advisors that no, you need 5 years professional theatrical experience, which I didn't have, or a PhD, which I didn't have. So I had hoped to teach at the university level, and that was quashed very quickly. So I moved back up to the Los Angeles area. My parents lived a ways north of that, and ended up in the nonprofit world. And life is just synchronicity, I guess, for some of these things, where I had, had the degree in theater.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had also worked in the mental health area for a while in Los Angeles. I ended up running a mental health board and care facility. It's just a job I was lucky enough to get. And so when I really wanted to switch careers, I was hired as a special events coordinator for the Mental Health Association because I had the background in, with a psychiatric ward and care facility, and I put on big events on stage.
Sure.
They thought that was a good combination, and they hired me. And that's what began my 35 plus year career in the nonprofit world, leaving theater essentially behind, although I will tell you that I've used it throughout my career.
Sure.
I not only, I've focused more in fundraising. So you'll often see my title as Lynn Bohart with FAHP after my name, which means a fellow in the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy, because I went on from the Mental Health Association to work in a number of hospitals running their nonprofit foundations and doing fundraising. And, I often used theater. I had a board member that said to me once, Lynn, just promise me that you'll never stop being in a position where you can be creative, because I think you would die. Yeah. And that is so true of me. And so I would bring my theater in. For many, many years, I wrote basically fundraising plays, mysteries, right? Where we would then stage a big gala with people coming in, and we'd put the play on, and everybody would, people would dress up and stuff like that. So, I sort of carried my theater throughout my career, and ended up here in the Northwest running a small community foundation, which community foundations are comprised of individual funds.
Yeah.
That are either created by individual donors, like like a person or a couple, or other nonprofits or other foundations. So when I began my tenure there, they had a couple $1 million. When I left, they had over 15 million. And we would then give grants out throughout the year from those funds based on what the donors donor advised funds, they would determine where the grants went. So I spent my entire career in the nonprofit world, and raising money for everything from a hospice house in the Eugene Springfield area of Oregon to respite care to dialysis units and machines at hospitals. And it was kind of run the gamut of things I've raised money for.
Well, let me back you up in time a little bit, because I want to dig a little bit deeper into some of these other issues, because it's a wide array of health issues and social issues that you've been involved in your whole career. But let me dig a little bit deeper, if I can, into how it all started. So you moved from Chicago to Pasadena. Only child? Do you have siblings?
No, I have two older brothers. So my parents moved when I was only 2. So I don't remember Chicago at all.
All right.
Although I was in Chicago on 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Oddly enough, I was there for a conference that then, I literally had flown in the night before, and then the conference didn't happen.
Yeah.
So we moved from there to Southern California. My older brother had asthma, and the doctor said, get him into a warm, dry climate. So that's what my parents did. And then, I have to admit, when I was young, very young. Of course, I wanted to be a cowgirl. That was kind of my big my big dream.
Good.
And
Good.
then by high school, it was theater. It just and we're going to get into storytelling, but the draw of theater to me, a lot of it had to do with the concept of storytelling. And
Tell me more about that in high school. What helped make that switch for you? What was that draw that as a teenager you were kind of
I took a
moth to a
drama
flame
class.
kind of thing?
I took a drama class from a guy, Mr. Franco, who's gone now, and they're at that high school. Their theater is now named after him.
Oh, nice.
So he was one of those people that the kids loved him and just kind of flocked to him. And it's like anybody, it created a kind of a family within that department. So I was in that department for the full 3 years that I was in high school.
Yeah.
And my senior year, there was an English teacher in the school who was really, really good at stage makeup.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be on stage. I kind of tried that and I wasn't actually very good at that. So I loved the backstage stuff, and I worked with her doing stage makeup, which was really creative to me and fun. She was amazing at it. And so that when I decided when I was going to go to college, I picked San Diego State. So that's where I went to school, got my bachelor's degree. And I remember when I started talking to people like going for my graduate degree, I kind of thought makeup or costume design, and the woman who was in charge of the department there said, "Don't." She dissuaded me from that because she said it's really tough for women.
Oh.
It's very, very tough for women. So what do? I go into directing, which is, anyway,
probably arguably tougher.
Well, but it's one of those things, and this may have happened to you in your lifetime, Stephen, when I took my first directing class, probably when I was a junior in college, junior or senior. I can't remember if it was, but I felt like I was home. It was like I already knew the material. I had this absolute baseline of confidence, so that by the time I was ready to do my graduate degree, then, it was do it directing specifically.
Yeah.
And I've never regretted it, even though I've never earned a dime at it. I've never, ever regretted it. And I've encouraged a lot of young people that I've known to go into theater because it has so many side benefits in helping you be present, when you're talking and have confidence. Public speaking, you can be in front of a group.
Yeah.
You organize your thoughts better. It helps you read a room better. There's just a lot of benefits, I think, to being, having a theater background. So, and then once I got into writing fiction, I told you I just did a podcast on Monday with a couple of writers who the podcast, and we were talking about setting in a story. And I said, well, I visualize every scene in my book.
Yeah.
It's a movie or a stage play. And I've often said you wouldn't want to be driving next to me on the freeway because I'm in the beta.
You're creating your world in your mind. Yeah.
But that's
totally get that.
As a visual person, that's what I do. So anyway, I just so I'm really happy. I'm a little bit disappointed that I never taught it, but I've taught writing. I've taught for 10 plus years at Green River College, and I love to teach. And I did, through continuing education in Oregon, teach acting.
Yeah.
So I sort of feel like I've hit all the things I really wanted to do and had the best of both worlds.
Now, in your undergrad and graduate programs, were you directing then and writing then as well as part of the program to gain that experience and those degrees? So
not writing.
Okay.
Not writing. Obviously, I had to take directing classes. I did take screenwriting class, things like that. And then to get my graduate degree, to get the master's degree, I had to direct a play, either physically direct it or on paper, and you had to apply. They only picked 2 people every year in the graduate program to direct a play on stage. And I was picked, fortunately. And so not only did my master's thesis is this thick because the script is in there
Sure.
with all the stage
So you got to
directions.
give the directions, of course. Yeah, that makes sense.
There, including the research I had to do, and so I did both, and happy to. I mean, it was just a great experience. And then I went on to do community. I've done quite a bit of community theater. Both in Wenatchee, Washington, up here, and then down in Oregon, which I just loved. And the problem is I'm kind of a snob when it comes to theater, so I have trouble going to community theater productions because they're typically done by people who aren't trained. They're just people who love theater.
Yeah, it's community, right?
And they kind of just grow up in the community theater family, and then they start directing, and I can just sit there and pick it apart. It's like, so that's kind of a downside to it all. But.
Sure. Well, let me transition as we get back into your career path a little bit, that 35 plus years that you had. Can you find a story for me or something that stands out for you as kind of a milestone change for you when you started writing a little bit more, or how did you come up with the idea for creating these fundraising plays, the mysteries, something that kind of speaks to that creative energy that runs through you, that seems to be kind of where you get your most joy from, is that creative process?
I don't know if there's a single thing, because
sure.
As I was growing up, I was very much into arts and crafts. I painted, I did oils, and that wasn't really into watercolors. I really liked doing crafts. So that, I did that through high school and through college. I actually sold some paintings. So there was that artistic side of me. And then, obviously in high school, and in college, I had theater. And, I suppose, I'd always dabbled in writing, started short stories and stuff that I just never finished. I not too long ago went through a file where I went, oh yeah, I started that 30, 40 years ago. But it was when I was living in Oregon, I decided in their community college brochure, somebody was teaching a class on ghost story writing. I went, and I love ghosts. I love the paranormal. I went, oh my God, I have to take that class. And the class was on the coast in this old motel that's right on a lake.
Oh, nice.
Where there's actually train tracks that go by. And she held the class. We went there for the weekend. It was a ghost story writing weekend. So the first night we met in the boathouse above the water, and she walked through some of the tenets of ghost story writing, and then said, okay, tomorrow, which was Saturday, you're going to spend all day writing a ghost story, and then you'll read it. You'll present it to us tomorrow night. And then we were leaving Sunday morning. So I had come deciding I was going to write a play. I spent half the day trying to write a play and didn't get it done. Second half of the day, I went, okay, just knock out a short story. So I did, called The Boathouse, because we were in a boathouse and it was a story. And when I read it that night, she loved it. She kind of sidled up to me the next morning at breakfast and said, Lynn, you could publish that. I just remember driving home. My head went from this size to this size, like, oh my God, I could be an author. It's just so funny. It's like one compliment like that. Yeah. Little did I know the road that I was about to start on, because becoming a published author, I'm self-published, because becoming traditionally published is near impossible these days. Yeah. And it's very frustrating for most people. There's just so many barriers in the way. But still, even to be self-published and be, somewhat successful, you have to know your craft. And there was
of course
much to learn.
Yeah.
So that was a many, I'm still learning. Even though I'm teaching, I'm still learning. I still sit on online summits and webinars and, read books on writing, because it never really ends. There's always
We
more.
should always be learning. Anybody who feels like they've learned it all and have crossed some sort of finish line, I question.
Maybe
'Cause
Stephen King. Maybe Stephen King. I don't know.
I'm hopeful somewhere in there he's like, I'm still learning how to
Yeah.
do it as well. But yeah, maybe one exception to that rule is Stephen King, but still, we gotta, as long as we're breathing, we should be learning and growing.
Yeah.
Um, so do you want to? That's maybe a good transition into you. You are a writer and you've self-published several books. You want to kind of talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
that part of your journey, and
Yeah.
I see one of the books behind you there.
Yes.
So
So
yeah,
yes, there's two books behind me. The Key to Murder, which is part of my Old Maids of Mercer Island. You know Mercer Island up
yep,
here.
yep,
And No Place Like Home for Murder. Those are both part of the Old Maids of Mercer Island. I've also loved mysteries as much as I love the paranormal. Pretty much all I read and watch are mysteries. I'm just fascinated with the concept of solving that puzzle. And so I initially started writing a mystery. I wrote a book called Grave Doubts, and they tell you write what you know. So I wrote it set in Oregon, even though at the time I was in Vancouver, Washington,
mm-hmm.
because I was on the executive team of a hospital in Springfield, Oregon, and so
Yeah,
the lead character was very much like myself. She sat on the executive team, she ran the marketing and the fundraising for the hospital, and her executive assistant dies of an apparent overdose of insulin.
mm.
And she's convinced it's murder for a variety of reasons. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, I've never killed anybody. How do you go about this? How do you be credible? And I don't know anything about law enforcement other than I'd read a lot and watched a
Sure,
lot.
sure,
So again, I said, if you set it in the hospital in which you had worked, a hospital is like a little city in many respects. There's a public relations department, a pharmacy, a maintenance department, a laboratory, there's just everything, laundry, food services. I mean,
yeah,
you need something, you can probably find it in a hospital. Back then we had our own printing services. So I began doing exactly what then I wrote my lead character to do. So I started asking questions. I started talking to people within the hospital that I knew.
yeah.
And had a gal I knew up in the lab take me through the lab. I said, here's kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think? And so she walked me through some things. When I settled on this idea of killing somebody with insulin, I went to the diabetes educator on staff, and she walked me through syringes and insulin, different types of insulin, and how long does it take to work and things like that. So I really didn't. Oh, and then because I was setting it in timber country, Oregon,
Yeah.
and I wanted a big chase scene in a sawmill. And fortunately, back then, when I was still in Oregon, I had board members. I started writing it was I was still there. Board members who owned sawmills,
Or,
so
yeah, sure.
they allowed me. They turned their staff over to me to give me, tours of the sawmill. And so I pulled all that together and created this. It's really kind of a creepy but very satisfying story called Grave Doubts.
Yeah.
And then went on from there and created a detective series it's got 3 books in it. And then because I have a kind of an odd sense of humor, and I liked the Stephanie Plum books, and any of the writers that are listening will know who that is, Janet Ivanovich. I wanted to write something humorous and snarky, and that became the Old Maids of Mercer Island. And there's 6 books in that series now. And then because I just couldn't stop myself in one of those final books, in No Place Like Home for a Murder, in The Key to Murder, a friend of the lead characters from her childhood days dies on her doorstep. And
No.
he was writing a story about when she and her brother and he solved a murder when they were kids. And so in No Place Like Home for a Murder, her brother brings in the manuscript and says, "Hey, Julia, I think you ought to write the short story." That was just kind of to add flavor. And then my writing group said, "You ought to write the short story." Well, I turned it into a novel.
Uh,
And so I wrote my first young adult book, called The Case of the Missing Will, which was my lead character when she was 13, living in Wisconsin.
Nice. Yeah.
You know, then I'm dealing with no internet, no cell phones, no DNA. You know,
Yeah.
how do kids solve a
So,
murder
yeah.
back then, which was when racism was still, you know, still there, even though the civil rights, law had been passed. But that was
Sure.
fun to, I mean, you talk about storytelling. It was really kind of shift in my mindset, because
Yeah.
I had to maintain her personality. She's a really
Yeah. All this world building you already created, you had to kind of
yeah,
keep it alive just from a different era. Yeah.
but much younger.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Nice.
and when you know, because of what your show is all about, when I wrote the first book in the Old Maids series, I wrote the first chapter of this. It's this book club group of women in their 60s, right?
Yeah.
And one of them falls dead in her peach cobbler, just flat at one of their Christmas luncheons. When I first showed that to my critique group, they loved it. They thought it was hysterical. Yeah, keep going, keep going. I didn't have a story. I didn't know what the story was.
Yeah.
What's the crime? Why does she get killed? I sat on that story for 3 years, probably. I moved away from,
Sure.
or moved to Vancouver, Washington, moved from there to here. Finally, I was watching a documentary on sex trafficking. This is interesting. And I went, yeah, I could do that. I mean, sex trafficking is something that I just hate.
It's
just
abhorrent.
it's horrible. And it's worldwide.
Yeah.
It's pervasive. It's, I mean, how do you even begin to stop something like that? And so I decided to use that as the crime that somebody would kill for, knowing something about that. And then at the end of that book, I put in a paragraph saying, okay, this is something I hate. I've spent my whole life in the nonprofit world. I did a lot of research on this topic, and there are a lot of organizations out there that are trying to fight sex trafficking. So I encourage you, if you can, or if you are so inclined, to get involved.
Yeah.
And I got complimented by readers for that. They liked that. So I ended up doing bullying, child abuse. No place like home for a murder is homelessness, because homelessness here in Seattle is a really big issue.
It is, yeah.
And so I decided to use the stories, even though I'm not just coming straight out and say, hey guys, homeless is really an issue. You all need to get involved. In that book, people are literally somebody's abducting homeless people off the streets of Seattle to do really awful things and make money off of them.
Yeah.
And the point being is that this is a vulnerable population that doesn't have anybody fighting for them.
Right.
And so trying to bring that more to the forefront in a completely different way.
Right.
Well,
I love that transition, and that's and also kind of reminiscing a little bit about again my first guest, Adam Steelstra, the storyteller I had on, and the connection between you and him is sex trafficking. He's working on an anti-sex trafficking campaign right now that is incredible, and they're still out doing some of the fundraising, but I've seen some of the spots that he's put together in his medium, which is video production, and they're powerful and moving, and this idea of not just telling people that here's a problem you should care about, but through the power of story, grabbing someone emotionally, and then moving them into action that way. And it sounds exactly like what you're doing in your stories. You're using some of these social issues as an undercurrent theme of the story. So while you're moving someone through the process of the story, you're also raising their knowledge and awareness of this social issue that
you're turning that social issue into a personal issue.
Right.
in the sex trafficking book, it's the lead character volunteers at a homeless shelter for women, and meets a young Hispanic woman who has been trafficked here from another country
Hmm.
with, the old story of promises of money.
Sure.
Everything's taken away from her. She doesn't, they think she doesn't speak English. They only take women who don't speak English. She hasn't told them, so she faked that.
Yeah.
And he overhears somebody talking about she's pregnant. And that's one of the things they do is we'll take you to the States and you'll have a great pregnancy and everything will be fine. They're going to take the baby. So another issue is
Mm.
black market adoption. And
Mm.
then they would sex traffic her. So through the story, people get to know her,
Right.
and Julia helps her, saves her in the end, and then meets the baby in the end. And she has partially named the baby after Julia.
Yeah.
And so in storytelling, it's that beginning, middle, and end where you wrap it up into a nice little package that says, okay, this was really an awful concept to read through, but I really could relate to Rosa, and I'm so glad that she survived. She had her baby, she got a job, and look what, obviously Julia went to great lengths and almost died in the process several times to save her. But it's that idea of who's going to step up,
Yeah.
who's going to get involved. There's always something one of us can do. And so I'm using storytelling as a way to do that.
Yeah. Well, let me tap into your experience, both as a writer and in a nonprofit world, as well as a teacher, because you've taught this for well over a decade, and you've been a panelist at what was it? It was Seattle Film Summit and many other conferences that you've been engaged in to educate folks, and kind of want to turn that to where we're going now with the conversation, and help you educate my audience a little bit about why storytelling is so important. From my perspective, that's really why I created this show, and stories sustain us. Because I recognize in my professional experience and background in the 25 years that I've been in communications around environmental issues and social issues, facts and figures and data, while incredibly important, you need reliable data, you need the scientists, you need the engineers, you need those folks that really understand the numbers and all of that. That's not what moves people into action. It's how do you tell that story? You need the quantitative part, the data, but you also need the qualitative part, the storytelling. So can you maybe educate me and my audience on why do you think that is? Why is it that story is so powerful in us human beings?
Well, first of all, the human brain is wired for stories. I'm sure you've heard that said before. And it's true. Chemically, we are wired for stories because I think it's pronounced oxytocin.
Oxytocin. Mm-hmm.
Tocin.
Yep.
Which is the love,
the feel good,
the feel good kind of chemical in our brain. But
mm-hmm.
stories have a tendency, especially when you have that feeling of goodness of what's happening in that story, your brain, puts out that chemical and makes you feel good. And there is something about the human brain that likes suspense and fear. It again, your body is reacting to that. As long as you're safe,
Sure.
You enjoy that. And so we're wired. I mean, when you think about it, caveman sitting around campfires, there was no written language back
Right.
then. So they moved information from generation to generation through stories. They taught lessons through stories. I've written a couple of books on this, some ebooks and I'll mention at the end, that are available on my website.
Yeah.
That it makes a big difference. If you think of, the Mr. Neanderthal sitting there saying, don't go after a saber-toothed tiger because they'll eat you. That's not going to be as powerful as if you see it,
Yeah.
or he at least describes it in such a way that you are viscerally, respond to it and you can visualize that, then you're going to stay away from that saber-toothed tiger. And that's where stories come in. That's what they do for us. The interesting thing that I've noticed over the last few years is, I started writing 20 some odd years ago. During that time period, stories have become the buzzword in business and the nonprofit world. It's not just fiction authors like myself. There's just a ton of people out there doing webinars and classes on how to get new clients for your business through storytelling.
Yeah.
How to sell. If you'll notice, I'm on 8,000 writers, email lists. They always start with a personal story, which I begin to hate now because it's like a hack, right? It's like it's become cliche, but it's true with nonprofits too.
Mm-hmm.
They're nonprofit consulting firms. That's what they do. There's a nonprofit storytelling summit every year that talks about storytelling to help nonprofits raise money, because and when I talk to nonprofits, they are taught to just the facts, ma'am. They're taught to come out with all the
government is too.
all the data, and it puts people to sleep.
Yep.
But I'll tell you a couple other facts and figures. We now as humans have an 8-second attention span, down from 12 seconds, back in like 2012, I think it was.
Right.
So we're losing speed here. And
yep.
If you think about it, we are a soundbite world. We skim websites. If I talk to people when they're building their nonprofit websites, if they don't get emotion language onto their website that grabs and holds the reader's attention, they're likely to lose their reader. So when I'm teaching fiction writing, I teach grabbing and hooks, writing hooks, things like that. Because even if you've got a great story to tell, the Jane Austen days are kind of over. The bulk of the public loves genre fiction, which is, let's get into the story. And it doesn't mean you don't have to have, you can still have beautiful language and, great character. You want all of that. But the reality is that, they want to be drawn in.
Yeah.
They're not just going to read page after page after page of exposition because it puts them to sleep. We're just not geared that way anymore. So I think today's writers, both business writers, nonprofit writers, fiction writers, all have to understand that, and then know the language of storytelling. Show don't tell is a very big part of storytelling, which means you want to be able to describe something in a way that they can visualize it, rather than just saying, and it was a sunny day. Right. That's telling them.
Right.
That pulls them out of the story. You want to pull them into the story. So those are a lot of the kinds of things that I teach when I'm, teaching writing.
Yeah. Well, I love all that. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell and Hero with a Thousand Faces and Power of Myth. And you kind of alluded to that's the, that's what we are as humans. That's how we evolved or were made, or whatever your belief structure may be. That's kind of the way our brains function, and that story arc of the hero's journey, the beginning, middle, end, the 3-act play, all of those things are relevant in how we grab people's attention. And you can do that in a 30-second commercial or a 300-page book.
An opening sentence.
Right.
But it's also, stories are so popular because humans, so much of our psyche is based in curiosity. We're curious about what's going to happen to that person or to that, that group of people or whatever. And so as storytellers, we set up a situation where we basically make a promise to the readers, whether it's a nonprofit story or a business story, and that you're going to carry them through and you're going to resolve whatever it is at the end.
Yeah.
if you don't do that, people stop reading. If you're not successful, if you don't know all those little other things of the languages, that's part of storytelling, you can lose them pretty easily.
Yeah.
So,
well, what do you from an advisor to nonprofits, and that's where you kind of spent the bulk of your career helping other folks. What's some of the advice of give it a little taste, because I know you're a consultant now, you want people to come and get to your services, but how do you convince a client, a nonprofit organization, a social justice organization, or a climate action group, how do you convince them to move away from that idea of what I got to tell them the facts? I've got all of these facts. I'm a climate scientist and I got to tell them about 1.5 degrees Celsius and what that means. Nobody's going to care, but the climate scientists who spent their career and their life getting that data, they got to tell that data. How do you bring them along to recognizing the data is important, but let's package it up in a story that someone's going to care about?
It's to me, it all comes down to emotion. And I've done a talk on using emotion in nonprofit fundraising because they tend to shy away from it. Big organizations don't. They will pay advertising firms who will come up with great. I mean, you've seen the dog and cat ones that have dogs that are practically dying on the screen, right?
Yeah,
and your donation. We need your donation today. And they're not afraid to kind of push the envelope on that, but regular small nonprofits are. And I've actually had pushback in these talks by people saying, yeah, our board says don't get too graphic with that. Well, you can get real without getting graphic. You can talk about child abuse in a way of what happens to that child, emotionally and mentally, and that how your dollars will alleviate that.
Yeah.
You and I started out today by talking about the floods in Texas and now multiple other places in the country,
right?
And how that really is connected to climate change, and how somebody needs to turn some of those into stories. And we don't want to show, tragic circumstances necessarily, but we can talk about them and the reality that this is what happens.
Yeah.
This is loss of life. This is loss of, whole families, that can be affected if we act now, kind of thing. So I think a lot of it is our reluctance to do that. We just, a lot of people have a tendency to just shy away from telling it like it is. And so I talk to a lot of nonprofits about that, leading with emotion and then following up with the facts and then closing with the emotion.
Yeah.
When you make the ask, it's closing with the emotion. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that idea of emotions up, and I couldn't agree more with you that I think the systems that we have set up for private sector versus public sector versus nonprofit sector, they're these kind of norms that have been established over the decades that kind of separate those two. It's perfectly okay for a private sector company to sell you something using emotion to hook you into, you've got to get this product to be the coolest, hippest person, that you will be alone if you don't buy this product, or whatever, all about emotion, grabbing you to go purchase their product. But somewhere along the line, our social norms said, well, government and nonprofit, you can't do that. That's wrong of you to do that. You just need to stick to the facts, and facts don't sell.
Dumb. It's dumb.
Right.
I make that point in my talk and in one of my ebooks is exactly that advertisers and marketers have known this for decades, and they use this against us relentlessly.
Right.
They appeal to our vanity, to our egos, to whatever, to our sense of right and wrong.
Yeah.
Buy what we don't even need.
Right. Right.
So, I think nonprofits need to remember that they're on the need side. They're, helping your neighbor to have enough food to eat or have housing or whatever helps everybody. It helps
Right.
the community as a whole, as opposed to just standing back and saying, well, there's 20,000, homeless people every night with no place to put their heads in Seattle, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean
It
anything
doesn't
to
mean
them.
anything to anybody. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's without the emotional
Because it's not
context.
you,
Right. Exactly.
know?
Yeah. There's no personal,
Yeah.
connection there that drives you to not that people are not empathetic or compassionate, but those types of numbers, and particularly when you get into social issues and climate change, where you're talking about giant numbers and
Yes. And
things that are
like you say,
yeah
global.
they're
Yeah.
just too much for the brain to imagine. Well, what can I do about that?
Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
issues have to be repackaged into a personal touch, and emotion is how you do that. Another myth I like to bust on the show is that us humans are rational creatures. We're not. We're emotional beings,
Yeah.
who
Absolutely.
occasionally have a rational thought, but we are driven by our emotions. So if we're not using emotion to move social issues, we're
And see,
missing out
again,
on human behavior.
marketers know that.
Mm-hmm.
Marketers appeal to your subconscious, which is your emotional side, which is basically, it's not your logic brain saying, "Oh yes, do I need that or don't I need that?"
Right.
They're digging deep to say, "Oh, wait a minute. If I want to look good at that party, I better get this."
Right.
It's a very different thing, and they've known it forever.
Yeah.
So I think nonprofits and, I think the politicians are getting better at it, I suppose, but government agencies and stuff don't talk in that kind of language, very well. And, they're trying to sell you on concepts.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't relate so well to concepts.
Yeah.
We
Big.
relate more to what's the personal emotion, the human element behind that. When you think of, villages in Africa that hear stories of women that have to literally hike 5 miles every day to get water and 5 miles back, which is actually true. That's the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah.
Again, you just kind of like, okay, well, that's not me. I don't
Right.
see that on here. But you start talking about that in terms of the pain of leaving her family, the pain of her back. She's likely barefoot, the heat, you start painting a picture where you're physically feeling that. Then you're going, oh God, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Then you have to bring it home. You always have to bring it home.
It's got to be a personal connection. Yeah. I was reminded, I had a guest a few episodes ago, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. She's a climate scientist, but brilliant storyteller. She understands that connection between the data and the storytelling. And in the interview that I had with her a short time ago, she was talking about how politicians have failed. With both here in the United States and in Canada, some examples she gave of these great policies that passed and these wonderful things that were happening that were helping people across the country, and in the United States, that some of the infrastructure bill that was passed under the previous administration was helping largely people in red states, but those people in the red states didn't know that their job was being supported by this bill, or that this personal benefit that they were receiving. She gave an example of a carbon credit program in Canada where people were given money by the government and they didn't know why they were getting this money in their bank account. So the storytelling matters. If we want people to get involved and support policy that makes the world more sustainable, that makes the world available to all and tackles these issues like sex trafficking and houselessness and climate change
and healthcare.
Exactly.
I worry about this new bill that's been passed when they're talking about so many rural hospitals possibly closing.
Yeah.
Well, for us in Seattle, it's like, okay, that's not us.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't affect us. So we may just separate ourselves from that and not worry about it. But you start to talk, you put a face to that.
Right.
So the little girl or the little boy or, whatever, the elderly person that is literally dying because they can't get to a hospital fast enough because their hospital closed.
Right.
Well, then you start saying, could this be me? Could this be somebody I love? Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Then you bring it home. So you're right. They keep telling us what's wrong.
Yeah. Or
and
talking.
what they think they're doing right.
Yeah.
They're not really talking in terms of human, interaction,
that emotional connection. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Lynn, I could keep talking to you for hours about this stuff because I love it, and I think it's such an important thing. And if we're really going to try to move this planet into a healthier, more sustainable place for all, the power of storytelling absolutely needs to be unleashed. So I'm grateful for what you do. I'm grateful for how you incorporate these social issues into your books and how you're helping nonprofits and others understand the significance of storytelling so that it can move people into action. So with that, I want to give you a call to action as we're kind of moving towards the end here. And I hope folks are as excited about this conversation as I am. What do you want people to do now that they've watched this or listened to this episode and we've got to this point? What's your call to action for folks?
Well, two things, because I kind of, I have my little dog communications company, which is my freelance company. And it's through that I work with nonprofits, and they can go to www.lil. So instead of little, it's LIL dogcommunications.com. And if they work with a nonprofit, they even have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I help with writing, case statements, fundraising appeals, do some limited consulting these days. I'm working with a local group right now that's running out of money. This is nonprofit world is really struggling right now.
Yeah.
And then on the fiction side, I have my author website, which is www.lynnbohart-author.com. And I would really encourage, if people like mysteries, I've turned that website into something I call the No Alibi Zone. So, because I've really been listening a lot to true crime and want to help aspiring mystery authors.
Yeah.
And I have a newsletter called Let's Talk About Murder. And I've interviewed Marcia Clark. From O.J. Simpson trial. Barbara Butcher, who is a death investigator. She was featured on Homicide New York, which was a Netflix show. I'm going to be interviewing next month Kate Winkler Dawson, who's a podcaster, true crime podcaster, has a popular show called Buried Bones. She's a writer and a journalist professor at the University of Texas, I think. So I've had a lot of really great interviews, and they can sign up for that for free. But also, if they go to my either website, I have free writing tools on both. So if they're involved with a nonprofit, I have some free writing tools that they can just download off the Little Dog Communications website. I have some free writing tools and low-cost writing tools in the form of ebooks on my author website, so they can access those there. I have 11 novels, 2 short story books, and 3 nonfiction books on Amazon. So if they're interested in any of my novels or books, they can go to Amazon. I'm kind of that's like I'm all over the place. Somebody actually asked me the other day, so how do they find you? And I went, just Google me. If you just Google my name, Lynn Bohart, because of my speaking engagements and my teaching, I come up really, really fast. It's not hard to find me.
Well, I will make sure to put on the show notes your 2 websites. So if anybody's listening or watching to this, you can come to the show website and get in touch with Lynn that way as well. So we'll make sure to make it as easy as possible for folks to find you and look at these resources and work with you.
Let's do this. Anybody who's interested in writing, if they reference this show in an email to me, I will give them one of my ebooks for free. Not one of the free ones, one of
That's
the
fantastic.
writing ebooks for free, and they just have to reference your show, and I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. I'll make sure when we promote this episode that
Okay.
that's part of the promotions as well.
Okay.
That's a really nice and very
Yeah,
generous offer, Lynn. Thank you so much for that. I
you
appreciate
bet.
that. Hope people take advantage of that. So let me kind of move us along here to the last little bit of the show, and
Oh yeah, you're gonna trip me up with secret questions, aren't you?
No. These are not going to trip you up at all, but I can't wait to hear what your answers are for these questions. I ask the same three questions of all my guests. If there's longtime listeners, they know what's coming up. But I end every show talking about hope and hope from the perspective, as we've been talking a lot about emotions, but for those who study these kind of things, hope really is an emotion. It's actually a state of mind, and it has certain features associated with it. Being, you have a vision for a better future, you have some sort of plan of action. May not be fully built out, but you have some steps you can take to go in the direction of that vision for a better future, and you have a sense of agency. Like I can do something to help make this happen. May not be able to do it all by myself. I would argue in most cases you probably can't. It takes us all working together to get to a vision for a better place. But those are the three basic tenets of hope. And if we have that vision for a better future, steps to get there, and a sense of agency, we can feel hope. If we don't have those things, we then tend down towards hopelessness, which is where nobody wants to be, because that's a really ugly place to be. So I've got three questions for you. I would ask that you just try to give the first thought that comes to you. Don't think too much about the answer to the question. So Lynn, the first question for you about hope is, what is your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally, professionally, or for the world. But what's your vision for a better future?
I think it's hard to say what my vision for myself is without the world. I think we're going through such a difficult time right now. I mean, it is earth-shifting changes that what's happening in this country, and frankly around the world. It's not just the politics in this country, it is around the world.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to lose hope. I mean, I find myself hitting that point where I'm feeling hopeless, and I'm a very big believer in mindset and positive thinking. I bought a bunch of books. All through my younger years, I did this, and I've gotten back to it where I'm reading about positive thinking, using affirmations, trying to switch my thoughts from that feeling of hopelessness to hope. What can I do? How, even just if I can feel better about each day, then hopefully that will rub off on the next person, and the next person, and the next person. So I think, so for me, it's all interconnected, but it does come down to, just sort of a day by day thing for me right now. And okay, I have to show you something.
Okay.
Can you read? Oh, did you go away?
I'm still here.
Okay, sorry, I hit my computer.
No, yeah, I'm still here.
Can you read that?
Hold on to hope. Yep.
So I have it right here, Steven. I forgot all about that. Yeah, it's hold on to hope. And I think we have to. If you read Anne Frank, quotes and stuff by Anne Frank, who you would have thought had no hope.
Right.
She was extremely positive, in so many of her quotes and what she thought and said back then. And I think, God, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. So your vision for this better future is a daily approach to positive thinking, and wanting to make sure that your actions and your behaviors throughout the day are passing on positive ideas to other folks, so that it becomes this chain of positivity that starts with you and passes on to others, to others, to others. So tell me a little bit for the second question. You kind of already answered it, but I want to give you a chance to add to the answer. Why is that important to you? Why is that being positive and making sure that you're putting out positivity into the world? Why is that important?
Because I think it's really easy to get lost in negativity. I mean, it's almost like it's like you're rolling down a hill and all of a sudden you can't stop. And I look at many, again, from the nonprofit world, if you look at people that have been homeless who suddenly find themselves homeless and they are just thrust into this world of uncertainty, and they can really go down a deep rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
unless they find ways to pull themselves out. And I think we all have that happen to us individually for whatever reason, whether it's relationships or money or illnesses or, tragic circumstances, losses, whatever. And you almost have to do it one step at a time. It's like, it's incremental.
Yeah.
And it's just much like goal setting, where you just put one step in front of the other and you keep going, because if you don't, you're lost. And that, I've only been there a few times in my life, but it's a really awful feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I'm no good to anybody.
Right.
I was a lifeguard for many, many years when I was young, and I taught life saving. And one of the things that I used to teach is, because there's a tenet in life saving called throw, row, go. So the first thing you try to do is throw something to somebody. If that you don't have anything to throw, you row out to them. The final thing you do is get in the water and go yourself, because they can kill you. They can pull you down.
Pull you down. Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I used to say to people, you're no good to anybody if that happens to you. And I've never forgotten that if I allow myself to be pulled down into the negativity, then I'm no good to anybody else, to my family or the people around me. And so that's kind of what keeps me going.
Perfect. So the last question then, now we're going to pull in your emotions. We're talking about this vision for a better future, where you're staying positive day by day and passing on that positivity to others, avoiding taking care of yourself, your own mental health, your own physical health, to make sure that you're not getting pulled down by those around you who might not be in such a good headspace. So that's your vision for the better future. We know why it's important. Now imagine, if you will, that's the future you're living in, and that we're all living in that future. We're all trying to be what you described as your vision for the better future, and it's happening today. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it make me feel amazing, because to me, that's community. That means we have full-throated communities to not only to live within, but to depend on. It's how many times we heard it said that people join cults because they're looking for like-minded,
for belonging,
for a family. Mm-hmm. They're looking for somebody to have their back. They're belonging, and that's all fine. But we want the concept of belonging to be in the best interest of everybody, of the group, because and this is where I think people who deny climate change, are just so wrong, because the planet is part of our community. We lose the planet,
we got nowhere else to go. Yeah.
Over. So to me, it's the entire circle of plants, animals, people, planet. And the closer we can get to that collaboration, I don't really know how best to say it, but that concept of community, I think we've lost a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
And the more we can bring that back, and again, you kind of have to start at the local level. I think that's where our future lies, frankly.
Perfect. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for being a guest today on Stories Sustain Us. You have had a career clearly building community, clearly helping others. That interconnectedness you talked about, certainly you're a demonstration of that. Your career has clearly been all about that, and I wish you ongoing success with your writing and your books and your consulting and everything that you're doing to make the world a better place. So thank you so much for being a
Well,
guest on the show.
and thank you for doing the show. It's when I saw your show, it's what drew me to it. Hopefully there are more shows like yours will, be created and born, because the discussions have to be had. That's how we do this is talking and telling the stories.
Yeah. Well, so. Perfect. Well, Lynn, I wish you all the best, and we will stay in touch. I look forward to seeing how your writing continues to grow. Absolutely. I wish you all the best. Take care. Bye-bye. What a thoughtful and engaging conversation with Lynn Bohart. Today we explored the extraordinary power of storytelling, how it doesn't just entertain, but it educates, connects, and inspires action. Lynn shared how she weaves real-world issues like sex trafficking, homelessness, bullying, and child abuse into her mystery novels, giving readers not just a compelling plot, but a deeper awareness of social challenges. We also learned about her decades-long nonprofit career and how she now helps organizations move people through emotion-driven storytelling, not just facts and figures. And perhaps most importantly, Lynn reminded us that stories can make overwhelming problems feel personal. And once something feels personal, we are far more likely to take action. I also want to thank Lynn for her special offer to the Stories Sustain Us audience. Lynn is generously offering one of her writing tools ebooks for free to anyone who reaches out and mentions her appearance on this show. Now, please don't go to Amazon for this promotion. To receive the offer, go to her author website at lynnbohart-author.com. Select the Writing Tools ebook you want, then contact her using the contact newsletter page. And be sure to mention her guest appearance on Stories Sustain Us. I appreciate Lynn for her generosity, for everything she shared with us today, and for the ebook offer that she's giving to Stories Sustain Us audience members. Now, I also want to draw some attention to what Lynn said about hope and community. She's absolutely right. We all crave a sense of belonging. It may be just the most powerful driver in the human experience. We want to feel like we matter, like we're seen, like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. But it's not just about belonging to any group. As Lynn said, it's about being part of healthy, inclusive communities. Communities where we look out for each other, not just a privileged few. That's the kind of world I want to help build. One where we embrace interconnectedness, where we support equity, and where we act with compassion. Because in the end, we're all in this together. And I believe we can build that world together using the power of storytelling. Lynn's experience and expertise in using storytelling to move others to action, especially around deeply important issues, is incredibly valuable. And I agree wholeheartedly with what she said. Storytelling can and must be used to motivate people around all types of causes. Climate action, environmental protection, equity and social justice issues. These are just a few of the important issues related to sustainability that require good storytelling to move people to act. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not a storyteller, so I can't help. Well, here's the great news. There are no barriers to entry into storytelling. If you're a human, you're a storyteller. You don't need a degree or a book deal to tell a story that matters. Sure, education and experience like Lynn's can help you hone your craft. But if you've ever said, I'm not a storyteller, I want to stop you right there. That's just a way to stay silent. And silence doesn't serve the world. Your voice matters. Your journey, your perspective, what you care about, what you want to see change in the world, all of that is your story. And you can share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and your community. You don't need to be an author to make an impact. Just start a conversation. And if you do want to improve your storytelling skills, Lynn's nonprofit-focused services are available at littledogcommunications.com. Now, if you're inspired by Lynn's example, let's turn that inspiration into action. If you want to make a difference in your community, in addition to starting a conversation, consider volunteering with local organizations that support houseless individuals. Consider donating to groups fighting human trafficking. consider advocating for better mental health and social services, or simply consider using your voice to raise awareness about the issues that matter to you. And of course, if this episode moved you, I invite you to support this show as well in any way that you can. Head over to storiessustainus.com and go to the support page to learn how. Whether it's liking, sharing, subscribing, leaving a comment, or offering financial support if you're able and so inclined, every bit helps. All forms of support, big or small, allow this show to grow, reach new audiences, and keep going strong. I sincerely thank everyone who has supported the show so far. It really means the world to me. So thank you for your support. And I hope you'll join me again on August 5th for our next new episode when I'll be speaking with Meredith Patterson, Broadway actress, singer, dancer, writer, producer, holistic and mindset coach, keynote speaker, and the host of the Meredith Patterson podcast. Meredith is a passionate advocate for artistic empowerment, confidence building, and helping people step into their greatness. I was honored to be on her show back on May 30th, and I'm incredibly excited to continue that conversation on Stories Sustain Us. I highly recommend you check out the Meredith Patterson podcast, listen to our episode, and then come back here to catch our conversation on August 5th at storiessustainus.com, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for being here today. Keep telling your story. Keep building community that's inclusive and equitable, and keep working to make the world a better place for all. Until next time, I'm Steven Schauer. Take care of yourself and each other. Take care.